Tonight on LTC News, the arts and artists surviving the pandemic.
We couldn't really charge our co-op artists for the rental because no one was coming in, but we still had to pay the rent and the utilities and everything else. So it's been a very challenging time for arts organizations.
Introspection within nonprofits.
The meeting was proposed by the Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Consortium of Greater Lowell when they approached one of our executive committee members about having a listening session.
In the future of mobility in Lowell.
We want the roads to be more understandable for all users, and we want to give people more options so they aren't forced to drive and take up space on the road.
All this and much more on this edition of LTC News. Welcome to LTC News. I'm your host, Matt Nelson. Since the killing of George Floyd in May, businesses, organizations, and individuals have been examining their own behavior and attitudes towards systemic racism. People who were afraid to speak out against racist behavior are now feeling more confident that their speech will be heard and taken to heart. In Lowell, two nonprofits, Girls Incorporated of Greater Lowell and UTEC, have been called out by staff for racist treatment, which led their boards of directors to take action. On August 5th, the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Consortium of Lowell collaborated with the Nonprofit Alliance of Greater Lowell by holding a listening session via Zoom to hear about the accusations and to discuss how nonprofits can evaluate their own work cultures.
The meeting was proposed by the Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Consortium of Greater Lowell when they approached one of our executive committee members about having a listening session. And we had a meeting with those folks and the executive committee and decided it would be an important thing for the nonprofits to do and scheduled it for our August meeting. So we had approximately 54 folks that joined a Zoom meeting.
And I think it speaks a lot. It speaks volumes to me. It speaks that people are open to listening and hearing the experiences that our staff and sometimes, our constituents have in our community. I think it speaks to an openness and a desire on the part of leadership to make things better and to understand the impact of institutional racism in our community. And people were very grateful, were very open, a lot of great ideas in the chat. Comments, so it was really a wonderful event.
I think it was important for us, for all nonprofits, to understand the experiences of people of color that are coming to that live in the city and work in the city, the importance of seeing that reflected in the staffs at the nonprofits that they might be using or wanting to interact and engage with to make it more comfortable for them. And we want to make sure that the staff that are working for the nonprofits are treated with respect and dignity as every employee should be that's working in a position, whether it be a nonprofit or a business in the city.
Any organization that has done a strategic plan knows how important it is to hear from your constituents, your board, your volunteers, your consumers that you serve, clients, whatever you call the folks that you're supporting and serving. It is important to hear from them about their experiences. And then beyond that, once we hear some of the strengths and challenges, to begin to seek out resources to improve, depending on where the needs are.
None of us are perfect when it comes to race, and I think that's something that is hard to acknowledge sometimes. Racism in our community, in our country, is something that is such an evil that nobody wants to be tainted with the touch of it. And I think we have to get to the point where it's okay to acknowledge it and that it's okay to not be perfect as long as you're working to fix that. I'm not saying that any kind of racism is okay, but that we want to make sure we can move forward. And if we don't acknowledge that there's harm happening, then we can't do that. And for an organization that has worked very hard to help immigrants and people of color over the years, our leadership hasn't always reflected that. You know, I think we've always had a white executive director and a lot of predominantly white boards. We have been working to change that. Back in March or April, we added 2 more people of color to the board who were really excited about what they're going to bring to the table. But at the bottom line, we can't just be non-racist. We have to be anti-racist. And I think that the more that we can reflect and the more that we can communicate with other folks, and hopefully they communicate with us, when, you know, there's a recent video that talks about a friend would tell you you have broth in your teeth. Well, you got a little racism in your teeth. So hopefully our friends are going to tell us, here's someplace you got a little racism in your teeth and you got to fix it. And, you know, we'll try to do the same in a kind way, but at the same time, you know, making sure that we are trying to make our community better and stronger.
We all have important missions. And so if we stay focused on the mission of the organization and, you know, in the case of Girls Inc. and UTech Youth and young girls, particularly young girls of color, their missions are vital in this community. So we don't have the luxury of sort of throwing them away, but we do have to rebuild, and we do have to, as a community, come together and support them getting on the right path. And it sounds like the leadership, the board, and others are wanting to head the direction in a better path. So that's great to hear.
Listening to those experiences, I think it would be important for the nonprofits to start thinking about policy changes and other changes that might impact employees as well as clients that are coming to use our services.
So hopefully what will happen is that all organizations are taking the time to look internally, to talk to their stakeholders, you know, do surveys, do focus groups. You know, we've had meetings just with the folks of color to make sure that they feel comfortable having a voice. And, you know, we're probably going to bring in somebody from the outside to do an audit and those kind of things to make sure that it's not just us saying we're doing a good job. And I think a lot of organizations are going to do that. So we have about 8 things in our action plan, and they range from HR and volunteers to make sure our systems are equitable, to how we're working with our youth, making sure we're listening to them. We're doing a lot of programs, both standalone, but also working it into a lot of other programs to have those conversations, making sure we have a safe place for our youth, but also making sure they have a voice. A lot of times in our community, the voice that isn't heard often is youth of color. So we're trying to make sure that they do have their voice heard, and they've been able to do that through listening sessions with the congresswoman and the police chief and other folks who have been great about listening to them. We all want to make progress today, but the reality is we have to figure out how to make sure that even after the pandemic's over, after George Floyd is out of the news, that we continue to make this a priority, and that this is something that even if we make tremendous progress over the next 3 months, we know that we have to be checking in 6 months and 9 months, a year, 2 years to continue this progress, because you don't get to unwind, you know, 400 years of history in a couple of months.
As a nonprofit subgroup, we are going to look at trainings that can be offered across the community. We're going to continue listening. One session is never quite enough. We're going to continue listening. And I think we're going to convene nonprofit leaders to compare notes, to share ideas, and to see how we can collaborate, right? Rather than compete with each other as nonprofits, now is the time for us to really collaborate.
Last December, the city launched the Go Lowell initiative, a project designed to explore ways to relieve traffic pressure in Lowell. In the first phase of the project, the group collected information from the community with an online survey about how people got around the area. The results of the survey were recently shared during a Zoom meeting put on by Go Lowell. They started with busing.
We decided that we should try to make it easier for people to get to downtown without having to switch at Gallagher. We also thought that when people need to switch at Gallagher to get downtown, that the trip should be faster and that you should not need to wait long for a bus. Our first idea is to change the downtown shuttle, Route 18, to make it a more direct trip between downtown and Gallagher. This change would use Dutton Street as a direct way to connect the two places. Our second idea is to run rush hour trips that go across the city and through the downtown. Here, we show how we would connect the number 5 bus and the number 2 bus so that people going downtown from the Highlands or from Belvedere would not need to transfer to a different bus at Gallagher. We focused on these 2 routes because we saw that they had the most number of riders who were going to Gallagher and then switching to the shuttle or the circulator to continue downtown.
They then moved on to walking.
This map is a heat map that highlights common areas that were noted as trouble spots in our last survey. The Lord Overpass was probably the most commonly picked area in the whole city as a trouble spot. Western Avenue, both from the west and the east, was another common problem area. The city is currently studying the feasibility of options to improve pedestrian access along Western Avenue. The city is also aware of the difficult crossing at Market and Dutton Street, which is the third example here. Many people noted that they felt danger in using the crosswalks due to vehicles passing in high speeds or blocking the crosswalk in traffic. Many people wrote that the crosswalks were not well maintained and were faded. So first of all, in these pictures, curb extensions and bump outs with ADA compliant ramps shorten crosswalk distance and also increase the visibility for those waiting to cross the street so they aren't hidden behind parked cars. Flashing lights with signage has proven in studies and in the field to increase driver awareness and slow traffic as pedestrians cross the street.
The seminar closed with biking.
Many people mentioned the lack of bike routes and the need for more bike routes that are safer than the existing bike routes. We also heard concerns about the lack of bike parking and storage throughout the city. Another common comment is that the road conditions are often not really suitable for biking. The pavement markings maybe aren't there anymore, they're in poor condition, or the road, isn't in great condition either. So on shared streets, traffic calming is used to ensure a consistent low stress street. So 2 examples here are shown here is a curb extension, which we saw in the pedestrian presentation, and a neighborhood traffic circle, which requires vehicles to slow down to navigate. On busier streets, a separated bike lane is required to maintain the same low level of stress as the calmer neighborhood streets. So based on the community survey, the existing conditions, the level of stress analysis, the origin and destination map, the project team drafted a bike network that you will have an opportunity to comment on through the online map.
The full seminar can be viewed on their website, lowellma.gov/go-lowell, and on LTC channels 8, 95, and 99. The pandemic shutdowns have hit a lot of businesses hard, and art galleries are no exception as they depend heavily on tourists and foot traffic. In this segment, we'll hear from several local galleries how the pandemic has affected them and what their plans and hopes are for the future.
We have lots of artists in Lowell, and all of them are hurting because we've lost the ability to show our work and to sell our work. We depend on people coming through and seeing our art, and hopefully some of them buying some art. But mainly the work of an arts organization like ALL is to support artists by putting their work on display so that the public can see it and hopefully buy it. And we were closed for 3 months, so we had no traffic coming in the gallery. We had no income we couldn't really charge our co-op artists for the rental because no one was coming in. But we still had to pay the rent and the utilities and everything else. So it's been a very challenging time for arts organizations.
So to stop for a few months definitely made a difference for some people. More so the artists that couldn't do their classes, they were teaching classes. And some artists use the money they make from teaching to pay their studio rent. So that was a problem for some artists. But our board of directors decided to waive the rent for a couple months, and we wanted to hold on to our artists. We didn't want them to leave.
the building, Western Avenue Studios, has such a really kind of good sense of community, and you get a lot of support from the other artists that are on your floor or in the building, or your friends when you pass by. It's just a good feeling to know they're here. And when there's only one or you or another person on your floor, it is depressing. You kind of give up the motivation to come in. And a lot of other artists as well, they do the show circuit. And when you don't have that show circuit available to you, then your sales plummet, and you're only available online. But with any kind of artist goods, whether it's a 2D or 3D, or if it's a woven or ceramic, whatever, the idea is that you get to see it and touch it, and that really, makes you want to buy it because you love an object, and that has sort of petered out. I mean, it's just not as available as it used to be.
We have 5 galleries downtown if we spread out from the center. But, people don't always come to see art. People come to eat out. They come to shop. They come to see pretty parks or hear music. And a lot of that has really contracted lately. And the pandemic has hurt our businesses to the extent that every time you walk down the street, you see another one that's papered up or closed. And in order to promote our vibrancy downtown, we have got to support those businesses. Because I will say that even though we've been open 2 weeks, we've had very little foot traffic because understandably, people are concerned about going into public spaces. And I don't blame people for being concerned. Our current exhibit is postcards, greetings from Lowell. And I'm standing in the part of the gallery with over 200 postcards, all done by local artists and all for sale. The best thing you could do is come in, look at the art, or we've made an accommodation for people who are afraid to go into a gallery. And that is, you could go online and you can click to buy postcards and we'll mail them to you. So I think that Western Avenue is very much on the right track by giving some alternate things that are going on at Western. But our downtown needs the same thing. Maybe we need a brewery. Maybe we need an outdoor arts venue on a regular basis that people could see art or demonstrate art or even hear music. And it's our hope at all, and certainly the other galleries, that we will come back, that there will be more attention paid to our beautiful art, and also our downtown will thrive. So that's a wish for the future, in better times when the pandemic's over.
In this week's Sunspot, Lowell Sun reporter Emma Murphy sits down with UML Chancellor Jacqueline Moloney.
Hello and welcome to the Sunspot. I'm Emma Murphy, a reporter with the Lowell Sun. Today we have with us UMass Lowell Chancellor Jackie Moloney. How are you doing today, Chancellor?
Hi, Emma. I'm doing okay. It's our new favorite go-to response to how are you doing today. It's taken on a whole new meaning, hasn't it?
It has, certainly. So recently, UMass Lowell sent out a message to students and families about the reopening plan for the fall, which will include virtual learning. How is that virtual learning going to look different from the spring?
Sending out the message to our students Monday was a very difficult decision for us. You know, we consulted with everyone, including considering the governor's guidance and the uptick in the state. But certainly looking at remote learning, we always knew that what happened in the spring, we moved 2,700 courses online in a matter of 5 days. Now, albeit UMass Lowell, we have a fantastic online education program. It's one of the largest in the Northeast. And so 50% of our faculty are very well-equipped and experienced online instructors. So teaching remotely was not as heavy a lift for them. But certainly some of our faculty had to learn out of the gate, but they did a great job, just like all of us, adjusting to Zoom, this new technology, the same with our students. heard lots of stories of students coaching the faculty. Oh, professor, if you just go up in this corner, if we try this technology, and the faculty being so patient and helpful with our students who had to make those adjustments. Fast forward to today, we have been going around the clock throughout the summer with professional development seminars for our faculty. You know, they're just so eager to make this as interactive and as engaging as possible. It's what we do in our online education program. So I think these courses in this remote environment will be vastly different from the student experience in the spring. We think there'll be great improvements in the quality.
Are there going to be new digital tools or anything else that you'll be incorporating into these courses?
So now that they've had the experience, they really do know what works. They know much better what multimedia tools to bring in. So we'll be using primarily Zoom and Blackboard. So many of our faculty have great interactive programs on Blackboard because they teach students all over the world asynchronously. So to teach our students here, that will be in a synchronous mode where everybody's there together at the same time. Honestly, it's even easier to make that engagement work. So yes, we'll see some really, I think, rich use of technology, lots of good lessons learned. And I think the students will really, and that's what they crave, is that interaction and engagement. That really is what education is all about. And we'll strive to make it the best we can.
What supports will be available for teachers who are teaching in person on campus and then also online?
That's a great question, because even on campus now, I mean, all of our classrooms are equipped with what we call smart technology. So each classroom is already adjusted to make sure. So for example, a student gets sick and can't come to that face-to-face class. They're going to be able to watch that lecture online. So we have a lot of backup, redundant technology that will provide great access to students. And again, we have an incredible team of professional development staff who have been working in this field. They've gotten national recognition for the work that they do in faculty development and teaching with technology. So you'll see great improvements in the classroom as well as online.
And can you explain a bit the breakdown of what classes will be in person on campus and what will be remote?
We're going to have any labs or studios, anything that really requires intense hands-on interaction. For example, many of our nursing students take courses in what they call a SIMS lab. It's a simulation lab where they apply different treatments to these like robots, and so that they can test treatments. So those courses really have to be face-to-face, and so those will be the focus of what we offer this semester.
And is the university planning to offer the full slate of courses compared to past years?
It'll be the same schedule. We're going through the courses right now, making adjustments. Those that were going to be hybrid now may be fully remote. Some of them that were going to be fully face-to-face, making them more hybrid. So again, that we can depopulate the campus as much as possible, and again, minimize the risk.
So what can the students and staff on campus, what can they expect to find as they start classes?
Honestly, I think, well, on multiple levels. On one level, they'll find the same experience they have everywhere that they go now. Hopefully, everyone wearing masks, everyone engaging seriously in social distancing, taking seriously hand sanitizing. So you'll see that all across every classroom, every building that you enter. Everything will be fully monitored again so that we can enhance the contact tracing as we go through the semester. We will also institute a broad-based surveillance testing program, especially for those students who will still have to stay on campus. As you know, we have some students who will have to have their residence at UMass Lowell. We're going to minimize that as much as possible, but all of those students will be tested weekly, and we'll be rotating it through floors, through buildings, but every student tested weekly, And that's something that we will be providing as the university at no cost to the students. We'll also be doing some sampling testing. We may have some athletes on campus. They will all be required to be tested. And then we will have faculty who will volunteer to be part of a sample. So again, that we're monitoring our entire university community as closely as we can so that we'll be able to identify if there is a problem and someone contacts COVID, which may happen. Gratefully, we're seeing that positivity rate go down again in Massachusetts, which is very encouraging for all of us. But the protocols that we have in place across the university, which we would have had in place in our back to school plan, that will make a big difference, we feel, in the repopulation of the campus.
And will there be any financial adjustments for students?
At the beginning over the summer, the president led a conversation about our tuition, and all of the UMass campuses, along with the Board of Trustees and the president, agreed that we would waive our tuition going into the fall, the tuition increase that we would normally be making at this time of year, somewhere around 3%, but we're going to waive that this year in lieu of, two things. One is the hardship on students and the experience. But understanding the experience we're about to deliver is at least, if not far more expensive. When you look at the testing that we will engage in, all of the technology infrastructure that we've put in place to enhance the instruction that the students will be receiving, all of the virtual events that we'll be hosting. In last year, between March and commencement, we hosted 1,000 virtual ceremonies at UMass Lowell in just that time. So each one of those takes a lot of coordination and technology resources. So for those reasons, the tuition will remain frozen.
Thank you so much, Chancellor, for joining us, and best of luck. Chris Scott will be back next week. Have a good night, everyone.
And that does it for this edition of LTC News. You can find us on LTC channels 8, 95, and 99, online at ltc.org, on Roku in the LTC News playlist, on Facebook at LTC Lowell, or on our YouTube page. We leave you now with shots of the Riverwalk. I'm your host, Matt Nelson. Thanks for joining us.